And thank you all for your patience today. This presentation, as Uli mentioned, will cover how you can create meaningful involvement in your tech community. So before I jump into that, I'd like to just tell you a little bit more about myself. So my name is Bianca. I'm originally from Canada, but I'm currently located in San Francisco, where I work as an engineering manager at Uber. Prior to that, however, I worked at Postmates before the company was acquired by Uber, and that's most similar to the Uber Eats side of the business. I started working there as an iOS engineer on the Fleet team, which is the courier side of the business, and eventually transitioned to the Fleet Android team. And over time, I had the opportunity to work on the merchant and the consumer iOS and Android apps as well. These skill and role changes all occurred within the same company, which is or was one of my tech communities that offered many opportunities to be involved and in different ways. So being involved in the tech community may mean many things, but first it starts with understanding what the community is and who is a part of it. So in the example I gave you, Postmates was just one of mine in recent years. And so you may begin by asking yourself, how do you define your tech community? Truthfully, you can define it however you'd like, based on what resonates with you. When I think about my time in school, the faculty and the student community, and some of them continue to be so today. As a software engineer and now engineering manager, the scope of the community is my teammates, the engineering department, the company as a whole, and sometimes even external customers and partners. You can take that even a level higher and consider the tech industry as a whole, or the industry in which your company operates, such as logistics in my case, and that would be your community. If that's a bit too broad for you, you can move a level lower instead to the subsets of the industry, to perhaps groups or individuals who are underrepresented in tech. So in my case, that may be women or persons of color. Your community may also be based on geography. So for some in-person talks I've given, I targeted the community of San Francisco or the Bay Area. But of course now in a virtual time, this community would be a lot broader, and geography is less of a concern in this case. And then of course, perhaps more obviously, the community can also be based on the technology or the languages that you're working with. Oops. And finally, there's also the family and friends and other folks you may have encountered along the way. Contrary to what you might be thinking, defining your community doesn't limit you or your ambitions. Your definition can easily change over time or even immediately, depending on the goals that you're trying to achieve. So regardless of what your goals are, defining your community can be helpful, and getting to know that better will help you give a clearer sense of the impact you're making in that community. So now that we've defined some tech communities, the next question that may come to mind is how? How can you be involved in your tech community in the first place? And there are such varying degrees of involvement here that it's difficult to know where to start. So I decided to start by using myself and my own experiences as initial examples. Outside of work, I enjoy being an active member of my tech communities by working with and mentoring students and early career professionals and people who tend to be newer to tech. Also evident by my session here with you all today, I've presented talks and written articles and blog posts and participated in research and interviews and panels and collaborated with others in side projects and more. Definitely couldn't fit it all here, but I thought this would be a good overview of some of the things that you may be interested in doing as well. And based off that slide, like I said, it doesn't all fit. So it might seem like a lot at first. It may seem even overwhelming. So first, I'd like to go on a tangent to address the difficulties of being involved in your community and some common concerns I've noticed over the years, as well as some ways to solve them. So the first one listed here is it's too expensive. But it doesn't have to be. There are a lot of free or cheap ways for you to stay involved. Next one is I have poor public speaking skills. That's fine. You can get involved a lot of ways without having to do any public speaking or any public presence, really, in general. I have poor people skills. Similarly to the last one, there are so many opportunities that you can be involved independently. It's too difficult, but it doesn't have to be. You can do what you already know how to do well. And finally, I don't have the time. That one is probably the most common one I've heard, but that's fine too. There are so many different ways to be involved, and different time commitments would be needed for each. So transitioning back to the topic at hand of ways to be involved, and after expanding out some of my experiences and observations into a more readable format, we have this list, which basically ranges from the most to the least forms of involvement, although arguably that could just be a relative definition of that. So the first one is volunteering, and it may be the first one that a lot of people think of. Another way you can think of that is paying it forward, or essentially donating your time. Or if you are able to, you can donate your team's time. So the meaning of donating your time can vary depending on how you define your community in the first place and the influence that you would have in it, as well as the influence it would have in the people it helps. So it could be as little as an hour where you lead a workshop for a group of peers, or if you do a tech talk, or you can impact your company or your community in a larger scale by organizing an event. Another one that's less of a one-time opportunity could be a regularly scheduled experience. So that may be teaching a class over several weeks or several months, or volunteering as a teaching assistant for another class or boot camp. Or it can also include mentoring some people. And finally, there are options to join a committee or an advisory board. So this may have, in this case, you may have more responsibilities since you are taking a more active role in that community. But in all of these cases of volunteering, it would definitely be a way for you to help expand your network and help build that community either locally or abroad. As I mentioned previously, another example is you can give talks like this one. You can be proactive and share your voice and experiences. So some examples of this might be giving a lightning talk or presenting at a meetup or being part of a panel if you don't feel comfortable being up on that stage independently. Another example of involvement is attending in-person and virtual events, as you know from being here today. There are a lot of meetups organized around your community and around the world. So these may be talks hosted by tech companies, or they may be conferences, or meetups, or hackathons, and so on. As a footnote to this, though, especially for virtual events, I would like to remind you to stay present and engaged where possible, because especially for virtual events, it is so easy to get distracted if you find yourself multitasking or answering messages, etc. Another example would be, most simply put, to learn. You can attend classes and join boot camps and take courses, or you can also listen to podcasts and work through coding challenges and follow blogs and discussions and mailing lists. Do you hear this tone in my voice? It's because this list goes on, and these are just the ones I can think of. I'm sure based off your own experiences, there are so many other ways that you can think of that you learn and that you prefer to learn. So in this sense, I guess you can and should think about being involved in your community, not just as contributing to it, as may seem apparent for some of the previous examples, but you should also just consume what it has to offer for you. And a positive side effect here is it can also help you maintain a pulse and stay up to date with the current state of things in tech. Another example is to contribute online. So the former example of learning was you consuming, but another way is for you to give back to it. And you can similarly contribute to open source projects or blogs, newsletters. You can also just submit responses to Stack Overflow or other resources where you might find information. And now you can just use this opportunity to give back to it. You don't necessarily need to be an expert writer or a speaker, nor an expert in your field to contribute in this way. You just need to ask yourself what it is you're knowledgeable or passionate about. So one example of this, maybe you're learning a new programming language and you want to tell other people about the little quirks or other tips you found helpful for you. And this can also help to deepen your own understanding. It's like when you are a teacher and then you have to describe things in another way to address different learning styles, it can in turn help you understand it better yourself, since you're seeing it from different perspectives. And finally, the last clear example I had here was to donate money, equipment, or resources. So as donating to the right organizations can really make a difference to these groups and to the people they help. So as I mentioned before, this is definitely, all those examples I was talking about is not a complete list. And this, of course, is not a complete list because the possibilities are essentially endless. You can just think about how it is you would want to stay involved. And just know that however you do decide to take part, in whatever way, shape, or form, just remember that you do belong there and you do have something unique to offer with your own knowledge and experiences and insights. But now for the big question, why should you be involved? I was talking about where it is you'll be involved and what you can do to stay involved, but why would you want to be involved in the first place? For the summit, one reason, of course, is to level up. So you can be involved to level up your own skills. Hard skills or technical skills are teachable abilities or skill sets that are relatively easy to quantify, but soft skills are more subjective. And as such, they're harder to quantify. And sometimes you just need to make inferences about which soft skills are needed when you're applying for a role or when you're taking on a new project. So just saying that you have these or other skills isn't very meaningful on its own. So being involved in your tech community can help you create those opportunities to learn new skills and develop existing skills. And more importantly, give you concrete examples that demonstrate that you do indeed possess these skills or qualities. Another way being involved can help you is it can level up your career. So the first one here is break into tech. I didn't necessarily say level up your tech career. So perhaps to you, leveling up your career or your working life may be breaking into tech in the first place. Another example is you can become a trusted resource and get more recognition for your work, for the impact you're making in your role at the company you work for. And that can be great for hiring purposes or for when you're considering a new opportunity. Next one is expanding your professional network in a meaningful way, which can be both within your current company or outside of it. Every job has a social component to it, whether you want it to or not. And you'd have the chance here to build connections and relationships with people, including your peers. So an example of this that I found useful recently is you can learn from different engineers across companies how the levels stack up and where you might currently fit across the board. So what I mean by that is at one company, and SWE 2, like a software engineering 2, may be a software engineer 3 at a different one, depending on how they define their career ladder. As a result of expanding your professional network, you can also get mentorship and advice from someone more experienced in the field. Or you can at least start the conversations with them, and then maybe that'll lead more to mentorship and advice later as you build on that relationship. And along similar lines, maintaining those relationships can put you in a favorable position to request professional references later on. Or you might also want to request job shadows or informational interviews or other information that you generally find helpful to you. The next example here is you can get exposure to areas outside of your immediate work or gain a different perspective and develop your cross-functional experiences, or vice versa. This can help you and your team's understanding of the work you're all doing and anticipate for future needs or changes. Then, depending on your level of involvement and possibly also on the diversity of the people you're working with, you may also increase company exposure and profits and improve its bottom line. Another rewarding aspect of being involved is leveling up yourself. and your personal life and your personal community. You can give back to the community, possibly gaining exposure for others, such as women and non binary folks and other underrepresented groups in tech, or more. You may also inspire and support others by being the example they need to jumpstart or level up their own careers in tech, or even just being there to support those who may be uncomfortable on their own can be very helpful in networking opportunities for them. You can essentially help build a better tomorrow by offering a fresh perspective with your knowledge and experience and bring more scope and awareness to some issues. On an individual level, you may discover something new. And this can help keep your experiences and skills fresh. This would also contribute to your personal brand, which is what you stand for and the values you embrace and the way in which you express those values. Being involved in your community can also increase your confidence in your skills and abilities, leading to better and more efficient decision making. So, done well, being involved and engaged in your tech community may be very advantageous to you and to your career. And it's certainly something that you should be putting off, since it's easier, sorry, not easier, since an earlier start can help you reap benefits earlier as well. So, this is all well and good, but it still may not be clear right away how you can create meaningful involvement in your tech community. As I mentioned a few times earlier, being meaningful is a subjective concept. So I encourage you all to ask yourself, why is being involved important or useful to you? What it really comes down to is to use your involvement as a tool or a means to an end, where the end and its importance is up to you and what you hope to accomplish. And so you can create your own sense of meaning and purpose with your involvement. Thank you.